So, I move on to middle school, and at first it seemed like things didn't get better, and I had more enemies, and eventually I had one person come into my life that I thought was my best friend, but I was later to find out that she was just a remarkably gifted manipulator. See, she basically became friends with me because I was often lonely, and so she basically thought I was an easy target. And so she went after me, but see, I didn't know this at first, and she just seemed like a really good friend, and I really enjoyed her company. In fact, at first, when my sister tried to tell me that she talks about me behind my back, I got defensive and I thought my sister was just overreacting. And so I got aggressive, and my mother, while she knew Andrea was a pretty good judge of character, basically calmed my sister down by telling me that telling her that I just want to think the best of her, which I did, because she was my best friend, I thought. And throughout the year, I had two guys that were constantly calling me Devil Woman because I was different. And you know my testimony of salvation. Well, them calling me Devil Woman only intensified my fear, because sometimes I wondered, when they called me a Devil Woman, if they could see certain evil in myself that I couldn't see, and maybe that's what the nightmares were about, that I somehow belonged in hell. Especially one day when one of them actually told me that he hopes I die in my sleep and return back to the flames of hell where I belong. Those are basically his words. And they put some gum in the middle of my pants one time. And thankfully there was this one really nice guy. I'd known him since grade school, and he always stood up for me and was always nice to me. And he didn't do it because he had a crush on me. He was nice to everybody, and he stood up and he did what was right because it was right, and not for some kind of ulterior motive. And he didn't care what his friends or anyone else thought. He did what was right, stood up for what was right, and that was final. So anyways, but things did turn around a little bit. My dad and I, we started going to every single volleyball and basketball game, and athletes started to like me, so I at least had some acquaintances and people I got along with. And then in 8th grade, things turned around a little bit more. I know this is a little shorter than my last video series, but oh well, you get more of the gist. Anyways, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, and so in the 7th grade, I get this most spirited girl award as plaque. So nice. And all the students cheered for me, even the ones who hated me. Go figure, huh? And then in 8th grade, I pretty much got in good with the cheerleaders and the athletes. Some of them didn't like me, but it was mostly misunderstandings due to me hanging out with that so-called best friend of mine. I guess they thought I was like her because I hung with her. And I remember some of them saying she was antisocial, and I said, I'm sure she didn't mean any harm. But I was to find out later that she was just a antisocial, legalistic little prude. But anyway, eventually we got closer, so I thought. But one day, see, my sister and her were both in orchestra, and my parents that year were chaperoning a lock-in, so I got to go too and hang out with Nori, that was her name. I try not to say names, but I'm tired of saying that girl, that girl, that girl, you know. So anyways, Nori, eventually at one point, I said some joke that she didn't approve of, and instead of telling me in a Christ-like manner that it wasn't funny and that I shouldn't make jokes like that, she took me aside and she hit me. And she hit me just as hard as she could. And I thought about telling my parents what she did, but I didn't because I knew they wouldn't let me hang around with her anymore, and I was desperate for companionship. So she started frequently saying mean things to me and would sometimes be violent to me, and I would let her because I didn't know where else to go, who to turn to. Well, time went on, and eventually she showed her true colors, and she turned against me one day. And see, she found out the year before from my mother that I was autistic, and so she would use that as an excuse to exclude me every chance she got. And that just made her think that I was just a good candidate to manipulate. She enjoyed it, especially when she could see that I'd walk away for a few minutes and then go right back to her because I was desperate and lonely for companionship. So she started avoiding me, and thankfully I made some new friends, and they turned out to be better than Nori ever was, and I pretty much talked to them the rest of the year, and I made some other friends too, and they would always defend me, and sometimes I get a little over vengeful when it came to Nori and say some things I really shouldn't have said, but I was hurt and I wanted to hurt her back. So anyways, eventually she came and said, "Oh, I don't want to fight anymore. Can we be friends again?" Basically, is what she said. Next video.